Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Common Sense Credit Union State of the County Luncheon. Sure do appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you being flexible and being able to join us remotely. I will tell you that on Monday morning, Judge Branick and I spoke, and erring on the side of caution, we made the call to turn this into a virtual format. So obviously, we are very fortunate to have a number of sponsors, annual sponsors for all of our membership luncheons. We truly appreciate their support and their flexibility for this. Our title sponsor for the entire membership series is Common Sense Credit Union, and we have a short video from them that we're going to play.
You know, our community sure has had its share of rough and trying times. This year is no different. But as we all go through this, remember, Common Sense Credit Union is here for you. Our drive-thrus are open, and so are our lobbies. So come on in if you would like to talk one-on-one. As always, if you need assistance with your current loan, just let us know. We'll be happy to help you any way we can. Common Sense Credit Union. It just makes sense.
Very good. We have to say thank you very much to Common Sense. One of our two presenting sponsors for today is Port Arthur LNG, and we're going to hear from Kelly Prosser just a little bit later. Our other presenting sponsor for today's luncheon is the Medical Center of Southeast Texas. And we also have a brief video from them. Well, we sure thought we had a brief video from them. Maybe we can get that together before we exit for today. Let me talk a little bit about our other sponsors. Right now, our other sponsors for today are American Air Systems, American Valve and Hydrant, Christus Southeast Texas Health Systems, Entergy Texas, ExxonMobil, Function 4, G&G Enterprises Construction Corporation, Gulf Coast Materials, a CRH company, Lamar Institute of Technology, Port of Beaumont, Regina Rogers, and Total Petrochemicals. I'm going to thank them all for their support and flexibility. We also have a photo booth sponsor, unfortunately can't utilize today, but it's JK Chevrolet Subaru. I also want to thank our streaming sponsors, North Star Music and Crime Stoppers of Southeast Texas. Next, we're going to hear from Port Arthur LNG, who's going to introduce our speaker for today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gary Ameni, Chief Medical Officer at the Medical Center of Southeast Texas. We again find ourselves in a COVID surge. This is mainly due to the new variant of the COVID virus, the Delta variant, which is highly contagious and is making up about 83% of the new COVID cases we're seeing. Also, due to the low vaccination rate within our community, we've seen a surge within our hospital system. Our hospital staff, medical staff, is rising to the occasion to take care of the community, but we can all do our part in protecting our community and loved ones by wearing a mask, socially distancing, staying out of large crowds, and good hand washing techniques. And if medically appropriate, get vaccinated. We want to thank you for all your support during these difficult times, and please know that we're doing all we can and all we can do for you in our community.
Well, welcome back. Technology is beautiful, isn't it? Especially when it works. Well, in the meantime, we really want to have somebody come on and introduce our speaker. So we have Port Arthur LNG to introduce Judge Branick.
Hi, my name is Kelly Prosser, and on behalf of the leadership and employees at Sempra Port Arthur LNG, I want to welcome you to the Common Sense Credit Union State of the County event in partnership with the Greater Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. As a company committed to economic prosperity and leadership, we are proud to be able to put our energy and resources behind the important work of the Chamber, especially in coordinating events such as this one, which not only provide the opportunity to connect and get timely updates directly from our leadership, but to get a better understanding of how these key activities and initiatives contribute to the quality of life in our region. Today, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Judge Jeff Branig. If you didn't already know this, Judge Branick was born and raised in Port Arthur. He also attended the schools of law at both the University of Texas and Baylor University, where he obtained his Juris Doctorate. In 2010, he was elected to County Judge of Jefferson County, and ever since, he has been laser focused on putting his time, talents, and energy into working on issues that impact the residents of Jefferson County and the people of Texas. Judge Branick has led the charge on so very many important efforts in this region for more than a decade now. But one I'd like to call out in particular is his tireless work on coastal erosion and hurricane storm protection for our coastal residents. In recognition of his efforts, he was awarded the Wetland Conservation Achievement Award by Ducks Unlimited in 2017. He was also recently appointed by the Texas Land Commissioner, George P. Bush, to the Coastal Coordination Advisory Committee for the Texas Coastal Management Program, as well as the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA's, to its Local Government Advisory Committee. And why is this important, you ask? It's important in the respect that we have a local champion sitting at the table, a champion who is dedicated to developing strong partnerships with other government and oversight agencies to provide more efficient and effective environmental protection at the community, state, and federal levels. Oh, and that's just his day job. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that he has also been involved with numerous civic, social, and faith-based organizations, serving in a variety of roles, including officer, commissioner, board member, legal counsel, and so much more. In fact, some of these organizations include the Texas State Commission on National and Community Service, Port Cities Rescue Mission Ministries, the YMCA of Port Arthur, Southeast Texas Regional Planning Commission, and the list goes on and on and on. Last but definitely not least, and probably most importantly, he is husband to Sherry and father to Merritt and Ellie Grace, as well as manages to squeeze in time for some of his favorite hobbies, which include fishing, hunting, backpacking, river rafting, and reading. Quite frankly, I don't know where he finds the time to get all of this stuff done, but he's got the energy and I'm glad he's on our team. With that, please help me give a warm welcome to Judge Jeff Branick.
Ready to go? All right, well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today for this State of the County address that's hosted by the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. Obviously, I would have preferred to have been with you in person. Current circumstances being what they are, we're going to have to continue to make do, at least for the foreseeable future, with virtual events. This morning started out very strangely. Yesterday I have one of those Yeti knockoff cups that I use for my coffee in the morning, and I got out of my car yesterday, as is my custom, and brought it in and set it next to the kitchen sink, rinsed it out, washed it out with the wash wand that's there, and rinsed it and set it next to the sink so that it'd be available to make coffee this morning. My wife is a clean freak, and there are no stains anywhere in our home because of her cleaning abilities. And so this morning I got up and got dressed, went into the kitchen, put the cup in the Keurig and poured the cup of coffee and got in the vehicle and took off for work, and was anticipating getting that first drink of coffee. And when I lifted it up and took a sip, it tasted amazingly similar to what Dawn dishwashing detergent smells like. So that's the way the morning started out. And then when I got here to the Chamber of Commerce, we ended up having a computer crash shortly before the program started, which Jeremy's done a great job of recovering from, and we appreciate his work here. I'm wishing Bill all the best to a speedy recovery as he deals with us remotely, and of course to our entire community. There are a number of issues that have been going on across the county during the last year and a half, and many of you and your businesses are not immune to the impacts that COVID has had on our community. It has been a year which we have never experienced the likes of in the past, and I hope we'll never experience again in the future. As we sit here today, our COVID cases, whether they are the original COVID-19 or the Delta variant, because we're unable to test for those to determine which is which, but they have spiked to a level that we have not seen since January, and actually are worse than they were in January. Day before yesterday, we had 159 cases in Beaumont alone. That was down to about 118 yesterday. But the trajectory of the cases from a 14-day moving average have been on an almost straight up curve. Our hospitals, as we sit here today, are overwhelmed, and this comes at a time when nursing help has been very difficult to come by. Headhunters from other states have been actively recruiting nurses from across the state of Texas at rates that are 3 and 4 times their normal hourly wages, and so we've lost a number of nurses from area facilities, and hospital capacity is stressed to the point where recently we had 2 non-COVID related deaths that were caused by a lack of hospital capacity to deal with gastrointestinal bleeds and another issue which would have otherwise been a fairly minor issue. As I've said all along, I understand that people have very strong opinions when it comes to COVID vaccinations. I will continue to suggest, as I have done, that the vaccination is a good idea. I was vaccinated, excuse me, back in April and have not had any ill effects. I feel it's important, given the percentages of vaccinations that we've received in our county, that people, despite their convictions, give serious thought to getting those administered, particularly under the circumstances where we find ourselves today. Both the Medical Center in Port Arthur Baptist Hospital and St. Elizabeth's are forced to put COVID patients on gurneys in the emergency department so that while they attempt to find them beds. And I think they're doing a yeoman's job of trying to deal with the situation under very stressful circumstances. So I want to extend my appreciation to them. We have been working hand in hand between the hospitals, the Jefferson County Office of Emergency Management, the City of Beaumont Office of Emergency Management, as well as the county judges in Orange, Jasper, and Hardin counties to come up with a plan, working with the hospitals to combat this latest surge in cases. And we should hear a lot more about that in the days to come as those plans become a reality, which are aimed primarily at preventing patients from ending up at the hospital and getting treatment immediately after receiving positive test, or in some cases exposures directly to an individual who has a positive test. So that will continue to be at the forefront. I know that many of you that are here today have been adversely impacted. I know that Robert Turner's been an active member of this Chamber of Commerce, and if you go by any car dealership, you're aware of the impacts COVID have had on economic activity and supplies to retailers in our area. If you've built a home or a deer blind, you're aware of what lumber prices have done. I've actually put off building a couple of deer blinds because of the cost of plywood, and recently built a deck which I could have probably built for $400 or $500 a year and a half ago, which ended up costing about $1,800 in materials. So it's been a dramatic impact, particularly in the area of lumber and steel and vehicles and so forth. We've also seen food prices increase, but it's not been a phenomenon that's been a Jefferson County one. It's been across the United States, and so we're hopeful that we're going to move out of this and that people will exercise good judgment in taking steps that will move us out of this steep surge in the number of new infections relatively quickly. Changing gears a little bit, one of the things I think that's been a hot button issue the last several months, at least since April, has been appraisals and property tax. Again, by talking a little bit about county and city government and how we fund our operations. Home rule municipalities, cities, are separate entities that have a lot more leeway in how they fund operations, what steps they take, and what endeavors they get involved in. Counties are creatures of the state, and as a subdivision of the estate, we exercise only those powers that are specifically given to us by the legislature or by the Texas Constitution. Funding for county operations comes from three sources: property taxes, a 1/2-cent sales tax, so out of the 8.25% sales tax that's paid on every non-exempt purchase in Texas, the county gets a 1/2 penny, and fines and fees that are generated through our county clerks, district clerk, and the court system for criminal fines and so forth. We have thankfully remained steady year over year on sales taxes. We had taken a rather significant dive back during the first part of the fiscal year, which began last October 1st. Those have recovered to where we're relatively on an even keel with where we were in 2019 and 2020. I would not compare this year to which we've had a natural disaster, because traditionally, because of spending that we have at Lowe's and Home Depot and other home building supply companies in the aftermath of a natural disaster, we tend to see a pretty significant spike in sales tax receipts as people go out and put on new roofs and new windows and things of that nature. But we are doing all right from that standpoint. One of the issues that upset a lot of people in the community earlier this year was the new appraisals that were sent out. In some cases, they spiked very dramatically. My home went up 34%. The law in Texas is that a homestead property cannot exceed damage. And so the appraisal district was allowed to go back up to the original amount plus the 10%, which is what happened in my case. That caused a lot of sticker shock amongst residential and commercial shutdowns caused by of the board of the appraisal district. At that time, I was against that bill because I believed that it would politicize the appraisal process and not lead to any meaningful changes. I've now come to the point to where I'm ambivalent about it and would, if it gave the citizenry more comfort in the appraisal process, that I would be in favor of such legislation. And the reason I'm in favor of it is because the law relating to appraisals will not change whether it's an elected or an appointed board. The county has little input appointing one member of the board of the appraisal district because our tax levy is less than the school districts in the cities in most cases, and so they get the most votes in nominating members to and electing members to the board. So, you know, the state law is still going to say that an appraisal district has the duty to appraise property at 100% of its fair market value. For years and years, that has not been the case, and even with the increase in the appraised value of my home, it was still at a point that was just on the underside of where I would be willing to sell the home. So I really had no reasons to complain about that appraisal, except for some damage that had not yet been repaired at that point in time. So there are a lot of people, and most people that I've heard complaints from, I've asked whether or not they'd be willing to sell their property for the amount of the new appraisal, and in about 80% of the cases they would not. So for those people who would be willing to sell that amount and felt that the appraisal was above the fair market value, there are avenues of relief, and I would certainly encourage people to take the opportunities to contest those appraisals to the extent that they're not valid or don't reflect true fair market value. Every year, whenever the Jefferson County Commissioners Court and the cities and the school districts do their budget, we are required to calculate what's called the effective tax rate. And that effective tax rate calculation means what would our tax rate need to be in order to raise the same amount of revenue as we raised the prior year without taking into account new improvements on the appraisal roll. So when appraisals go up, the calculation of the effective tax rate goes down, and you've seen from the Beaumont Enterprise this morning that the city of Beaumont has reduced their tax rate, I believe, by 1/2 cent. Likewise, the tax rate of the county is going to be forced down by the calculation of the effective tax rate. And we will be collecting roughly the same amount of revenue as we collected during the prior year. I think there's going to be about $6 million more in new revenue, and that's caused by some new improvements that have come online in Jefferson County, which I could tell you the exact amount of. $865,176,811 in new improvements in Jefferson County during this past year that'll come on the tax roll and be subject to taxation, which is what results in our additional revenues. During that same time period, with the proposed new budget, will probably go up about $8 million because of additional costs that have been incurred, plus cost of living increases. Traditionally, every year the Commissioners Court looks at the Houston-Galveston Metropolitan Statistical Area Consumer Price Index to determine what types of cost of living increases we're going to consider for our employees. During some years, those CPI calculations have been as low as negative 0.8%, and I believe during my 14 years at the county, this year has been the highest at 5.18%. Yesterday, there was a tentative vote of the Commissioners Court to approve a cost of living increase of 4% for non-union employees of Jefferson County. And I'll remind you that Jefferson County is one of 7 counties in the state of Texas that has unionized law enforcement and correctional officers. So our costs are traditionally higher than those counties that are non-unionized, particularly when we are in an area that's more industrialized than some of the other counties in the state of Texas that are of similar size, like Lubbock, McLennan, Bell, Brazoria, and other counties. Brazoria is an industrialized county, however. So we are looking at an increased budget. We have had substantial additional costs during this past year that were unanticipated as a result of the pandemic. Most of those expenses, and I would tell you that 40 to 50% of the county budget every year is in court administration, law enforcement, and corrections, as well as our crime lab. So that's the bulk of the expenses that the county incurs. Of course, most of the rest of the expenses, about 80%, are in personnel, and the remainder in roads and bridges and things of that nature, flood control along county roads. So this year, our jail cost increased exponentially. Number one, trials ceased. So our jail population last year sat at around 650 people when the COVID epidemic began. Today it's sitting at 1,067, and we have incurred tremendous additional expenses in correctional officer overtime as a result of COVID infections among the population of correctional officers. We've incurred millions of dollars more in jail medical costs, which we're required to provide by the Texas Jail Standards Commission. We have had to move some prisoners from our correctional facility off-site to contract jail facilities because of overcrowding and rules of the Jail Standards Commission and state and federal law that require us to segregate prisoners, in some cases based upon the severity of their crime, in other cases, of course, based upon sex and based upon whether or not those individuals demonstrate evidence of depression or other suicidal tendencies or ideations that might make themselves a danger to themselves, or whether or not they are inmates who might otherwise benefit from mental health treatment. So our expenses at the jail have gone up dramatically during a time when we're not having any trials, and also during the last year the State Department of Corrections has not been picking up prisoners who have been pen packet ready, who have been ready to transfer to state jail facilities. And so we're being forced by the state to continue to house prisoners who may have entered a plea or been convicted of a felony that would otherwise make them the responsibility of the state, and we are not getting any reimbursement for those very significant costs. So a difficult year from a budgetary standpoint. We're going to continue to work with the sheriff to try to manage that situation as best we can. This week I met with the sheriff and the district and county court at law judges to see whether or not there are ways that we can address getting nonviolent and especially first-time offenders out of our jail population and back onto the streets, maybe with citations, ignition interlocks, GPS devices on their ankles, and so forth. And I'm very thankful to the sheriff and to the judges for their assistance in working to try to reduce that jail population in a way that will continue to keep the community safe, but will not saddle the county with the expense of housing prisoners who are not a danger to our community. So we'll continue to work on that. And of course, at the end of this, if we have the technological capability to do so, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Another issue that's been on the forefront has been the sale of Ford Park to the Renaissance Group, a sale that was supposed to have been consummated in March, but which drags on today. And we were looking at, prior to the adoption of the budget, having that sale consummated so that we could take the expenses associated with debt service and operations of the facility out of the budget, which could have the potential of reducing the tax rate per $100 valuation by 1 to 2 cents. Jefferson County's tax rate this past year, I think when I got to the county, was 36.5 cents per $100 valuation, which is the 9th lowest out of the 254 counties in the state of Texas. We had a reduction a couple of years ago in the hundredths of a penny, and we'll have about a quarter-cent reduction this year just because of the operation of the calculation of the effective tax rate. So we will be adopting next week in court the no new tax rate, which will not require us to have any public hearings. Of course, the Commissioners Court always has an opportunity for public input or comment at the end of every Commissioners Court meeting, so anyone who has any comments on that is free to attend the Commissioners Court either virtually or in person and make any comments you might have. The purchasers of the park have now sent us a letter telling us that they will close on the facility on or before August 31st. If that goes through, then we obviously will have a substantial savings in our budget during the coming year, somewhere around $6 to $7 million. That will ultimately benefit the taxpayers because it will be put into reserve. We do currently have a very healthy fund balance, one that we have intentionally kept high because of the number of natural disasters that our area has had to suffer through since 2005. People have heard me say this before, but I have the distinction, one that I do not covet, of having had more disaster declarations than any other county judge in Texas history in the course of 2017 to 2019. And so we are looking forward to a time of relative peace and quiet over the future. And so far this year is looking good. Although it was forecast to be a very significant year from a tropical cyclone activity standpoint, we have thus far been quiet. We have Fred out in the Caribbean Atlantic area right now. As it ran along the coast of Cuba and the other islands, it lost some power. It may, according to the reports I got from the National Weather Service this morning, it may increase in power, but if it continues to hug the land going up the coast of Florida, it should remain relatively weak, which is something I hope and pray for the residents of the eastern Gulf of Mexico and Florida, because that's where it's forecast to make landfall. At this time, it poses absolutely no threats to Texas or Louisiana, and so we're thankful for that. We are getting to what has historically been the most active parts of our season, August and September. We have another formation that's close behind Fred out off the coast of Africa and the Atlantic, and we'll be watching that closely over the next week. A lot of people have asked me about the forecast of an active season, and I said, if you have 10 storms and they all hit the coast of Georgia, we've had a pretty good year. But if you have one storm that hits us directly, it's been a terrible year. So all we can do is continue to pray and hope that we're not impacted by a storm this year. But your Jefferson County Emergency Management Department is ready, willing, and able to respond in the event that it becomes necessary. And back to Ford Park. So in the event that sale does not close on or before August 31st, the interest rate environment is such right now that we would probably look at refunding the bonds on the facility, which we had done originally back in 2011, and that saved about $11 million in interest costs. We would move to do it again to save additional interest costs because we're in a favorable interest rate environment. And we will await August 31st to see what our next move is. But we're hopeful that that is going to close and that private enterprise is going to operate that facility in the future and be able to make it, be able to spend more money on capital improvements out there than the county could feasibly spend under our current circumstances. One of the things that was talked about was coastal erosion. Most of you have heard me talk about coastal erosion and protection and response in the past. As you may know, during 2005 and 2008 with Hurricanes Rita and Ike, we completely lost our beach dune system and were left with clay along our 21 miles of coastline. That clay, rather than act like sand, which is in a constant state of recession and redeposition, dissolves in water. So we were having dramatic losses in the hundreds of feet per year along our southern reaches of our county. And so in 2011, after the BP oil spill and the fines and fees that they paid to the Natural Resources Damages Act, the Restore Council, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, I began on a quest to try to get some of those funding here. I think when I last addressed this body virtually at the beginning of COVID, we had been successful at that point in time in getting about $139 million in funding for coastal restoration efforts. As we sit here today, that amount is up to $182 million. We've completed siphons under the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway that will restore freshwater inputs into the 138,000 acre marsh system that sits in the southern reaches of Jefferson County and acts as a significant storm surge barrier for protection of both Beaumont and Port Arthur. We have completed the Keith Lake Fish Path baffles, and the Texas General Land Office, who we are partners with, is in the final stages of awarding the contract for the dredging of the materials from the offshore sand source onto the beaches to restore our beaches to where they were 100 years ago. And I'm hopeful that that work is going to begin in November, shortly after our tropical storm season is over with. And we should look forward to completion of those projects next spring. And that will be a huge boon to Jefferson County, both environmentally, ecologically, recreationally, and as a protection of our area from tropical storm surge events like we saw in Hurricane Ike in 2008. One of the other issues that's big, but I think that representatives of the Sabine Nations Navigation District have already spoken to you about the channel deepening project, the completion of the first usable increment of the ship channel, and plans to move forward with the deepening. They have been working extremely hard, and we're looking forward to see that project completed over the next few years so that vessels will no longer have to lighter offshore, and we'll be able to begin bringing in larger vessels that are more efficient and allow our area industry to operate in a more economically efficient manner. On the economic development front, I continue to be very busy meeting with representatives of companies that are interested in potentially locating new expansion projects within Jefferson County. You all know about the projects that are underway right now, such as Golden Pass LNG. Sempra Energy is next week going to be opening up the new Highway 87 that they have worked with TxDOT to have completed to allow their land to be more usable down there along the Sabine Neches waterway. Total BASF has recently completed an expansion project at their plant. Valero is working on some projects at their plant. And Howard Energy and Arbor Renewals are new projects that are in the beginning stages locally. I continue to get a number of calls and meet with a number of people, and I'm hopeful and optimistic that the next couple of years will see us continue to expand our industrial infrastructure within Jefferson County. We'll also work as we move forward, and as I always have, to reach out to companies in diverse manufacturing areas to attempt to lure them to our area. We'll continue to work with Lamar University and the Center for the CICE group on entrepreneurship and innovation to attempt to lure projects that they work with to our area for future expansions. But I am generally optimistic about the future. My focus as county judge is going to continue to be on job creation, on our making sure that people have the opportunities to have a good job that allows them to provide for their families, send their children off to school, and that's a good opportunity to talk about our wonderful educational institutions here: Lamar State College, Port Arthur, Lamar University, LIT, and other training programs that are available. I'll continue to work hand in hand with them, and to attempt to cooperate with them in any way possible to assure that we have a well-trained and available workforce as we move forward. So, Jeremy, if there's the opportunity, I'm happy to take any questions, but I don't know where we are technologically or whether that opportunity exists. I'm being told no, but I appreciate if any of you have my cell phone number, you're welcome to text me a question if you have one. But I think I've covered everything that I planned on talking about today. And thank you for the opportunity to visit with you for a little while. The telephone number at my office is 835-8466. If any of you ever want to talk or you have any questions, comments, suggestions, criticisms, then I'm always available. My door is always open. Just don't come up into my office and visit with me if you're coughing and hacking all over the place. But I thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today. I thank you for the work that the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce does here locally to promote business, job creation, attraction of new businesses to our area. I want to continue to work closely with all of the area chambers of commerce to make life better in Jefferson County, and I thank you for your membership in this organization and for your support of their activities.
Judge, thank you very much. I truly appreciate you talking to our folks today. I think when we set this day up many months ago, I don't think we contemplated some of your key things that you had to talk about today. So I think it's probably more important that you were able to talk to the folks, part of our members, about what's going on in the chamber and how we're working with you all to improve the quality of life here. We did solicit questions from our attendees for you, but you covered all of them. So we're going to let you off the hook there. Again, thanks very much for going over what's been happening with the county and kind of the direction that you see it going forward. I'm really happy that we're able to provide that kind of information to our members and citizens, but we couldn't do it without support like you're giving us. So thanks again. We do have a token of our appreciation. but we're going to wait and bring it over at the appropriate time. But what I can tell you, knowing your love of cooking, it will be a home run. So we'll just leave it at that. Before we let you all log off, I want to remind you of a couple of our major events coming up. And one of them is the Legislative Update Luncheon, which is currently, and let's underline currently, set for August 31st. Given what's going on with COVID and what's going on with the second special session, which it started last Saturday, I would say that that particular event is up in the air at best for August 31st. But I will promise you that we will bring that to you this year when it's safe to do so, and when we can give you even more information about what's happening in Austin. So stay tuned for that change. And then our annual meeting is coming up on October 12th. And here's a brief video from our keynote speaker who you might recognize, who's going to be at the annual meeting. Here we go.
Abbott. I want to say thank you to the Greater Beaumont Chamber of Commerce for your tireless work to support local businesses and to advance economic prosperity throughout your entire community. I also want to recognize Jason's Deli for being awarded this year's Spindletop Award. Thank you for making a tremendous impact throughout the entire Beaumont community. As you all know, Texas continues to be a national leader in economic development, thanks in part to the business leaders and entrepreneurs of the Greater Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. In fact, Texas was recently named the best state for business in the United States for the 17th year in a row, as well as being named the top state for economic development for the 9th straight year. So thanks to all of you for playing such a crucial role in writing Texas's economic success story. And thank you for all that you do to promote jobs and economic opportunity in the Beaumont region. May God continue to bless you in your efforts, and may God forever bless the great state of Texas.
Well, that looks like an event that you probably shouldn't miss. You'll start seeing some information on that next week, but we're really happy to have secured the governor to come and speak with us in the fall. I want to just again say thank you to Judge Branick hanging in there with us. I want to thank all of our sponsors because, again, we can't do what we do without your support. And I want to thank you all for joining in remotely. I know that we'd all rather be face-to-face, but it's the right thing to do right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.